You know, our story of this incredible ancient empire, it doesn't actually start in the ancient world. Nope. We're starting in the year 1618 with a Spanish ambassador named Figueroa. And to put it mildly, he's having a really bad time. His diplomatic mission to the Persian Shah has been a complete train wreck, and he's become a bit of a laughingstock. So, completely dejected, he starts the long trip home figuring he might as well see some of the sights of this ancient land to cheer himself up. So as he's traveling, his guides point out this place of local myth, a spot they call Chael Minar, which just means the 40 pillars. And as he gets closer, he sees it, this sprawling ghost of a city with these massive ruins just jutting out of the earth. It was a testament to a civilization so long gone that the people living right there in its shadow had completely forgotten its name. And then Figueroa noticed something that was just unbelievable. In some parts of the ruin, the polished black stone was so perfectly preserved that it was like a mirror. In fact, his own dog saw its reflection, thought it was another dog, and just started snarling and attacking the wall. It must have been hilarious. But it makes you think, a city that could resist centuries of decay so well, it must have been grand beyond all imagination. So who built this place? Well, to answer that, we have to rewind the clock way back. See, the story of Persia really begins in the ashes of an old world, a world left behind when the mighty Assyrian Empire collapsed. For centuries, Assyria was the superpower, crushing everyone. But after their last great king died, all their enemies ganged up on them, and the world's biggest empire just crumbled in only 3 years. And out of that chaos, new powers started to rise. And one of the biggest were the Medes. These were a tough, horse-riding people from the mountains of what's now Iran. While the Babylonians grabbed all the fertile river valleys, the Medes just swept down from the highlands and carved out their own massive kingdom from the wreckage. And this image, it just perfectly captures their world. The Iranian plateau is this incredible landscape of dramatic mountain ridges and these deep, winding valleys. And running right through it is this ancient highway, later called the Khorasan Road. For thousands of years, this was the main artery for trade, for armies, and for nomadic tribes migrating from the Great Eurasian Steppe. And one of those peoples were the Persians. They were actually cousins of the Medes, and they were living this sort of semi-nomadic life in the ruins of an old conquered city called Anshan. Right there, surrounded by the ghosts of a dead civilization, they pledged loyalty to the Median king. And it was here, around the year 600 BC, that a boy was born who was going to change everything. His name was Cyrus. Now, the Median court, it was ruled by Cyrus's grandfather, King Astyages, and it was a place of just brutal paranoia. The Greek historian Herodotus tells this one story. Astyages decided to punish a general named Harpagus for being disloyal. And his punishment was something out of a nightmare. He secretly killed the general's young son and then served the boy's cooked remains to his own father at a state banquet. Well, that unbelievable act of cruelty, it backfired big time. Years later, when Cyrus grew up and led a rebellion against his grandfather, who do you think Astyages put in charge of the army to stop him? Yep, that same general, Harpagus. And on the battlefield, Harpagus and the Median army basically said, no thanks, revolted, and handed their own king over to Cyrus in chains. So, with the Medes now under his belt, Cyrus had a powerful new rival to deal with, King Croesus of Lydia. I mean, this guy's kingdom was so unbelievably wealthy. They were literally mining and minting the world's first pure gold coins that everyone just assumed Croesus was the richest man on earth. And his absolute pride and joy was his army's elite, heavily armored cavalry. Before going after Cyrus, Croesus did what any smart ruler would do back then. He asked the gods for advice. He sent messengers with tons of expensive gifts to the most famous oracle in the world, at Delphi in Greece. The priestess there, supposedly inhaling some kind of psychoactive gas from a crack in the earth, gave him this very cryptic prophecy. If he attacked the Persians, he would destroy a great empire. Feeling pretty good about that, Croesus attacked. But Cyrus was a brilliant tactician, and he had a secret weapon. He knew that horses are terrified of the sight and smell of camels. So, he put his baggage camels right at the front of his army. And when that famous Lydian cavalry charged, their horses just freaked out, turned and ran. The battle was over. And the great empire Croesus ended up destroying? You guessed it. It was his own. After Lydia, Cyrus set his sights on the last great power left, Babylon. And after he took the city, he did something completely new, something revolutionary. Instead of deporting and enslaving the people he conquered, he let them go home. This single act, freeing people like the Jewish exiles, was so profound that it would be remembered for thousands of years. It even earned him the title of Messiah in the Hebrew Bible. But you know, the Persians weren't just about conquering. They transformed the very land they ruled. They created these perfect walled gardens called paradisa, turning these dry, arid landscapes into these beautiful, serene oases. This idea was so incredible that the word passed into Greek as paradisos, which is where we get our word today, paradise. But the life of this great unifier came to a brutal end. While on campaign in the east against a people called the Massagetae, Cyrus used a trick to ambush and kill the son of their queen, Tamiris. In the battle that followed, the heartbroken and absolutely furious queen defeated the Persian army, found Cyrus's body, and, as the story goes, she got her revenge by shoving his head into a wineskin full of blood and telling him to drink his fill of blood. Cyrus's death plunged the new empire into total crisis. An imposter, pretending to be Cyrus's son, grabbed the throne. This chaos led to a desperate and violent coup by a small group of nobles, led by a distant relative of Cyrus named Darius. It all came down to a bitter, hand-to-hand fight in a darkened room, where they killed the false king, and Darius seized the throne for himself. Darius turned out to be a brilliant general and an even better administrator. To hold his huge, rebellious empire together, he basically created an ancient information superhighway. It was called the Royal Road, and it had staging posts with fresh horses and riders. Messages could now travel at a speed the world had never, ever seen before, connecting the most distant corners of his kingdom. But pretty soon, that super-fast network brought some terrible news from the far western edge of the empire. The Greek cities over in Ionia had revolted against Persian rule. And even worse, they had help from the outside. A small, far-off city-state sent ships and soldiers, and together they marched inland and burned the great Persian city of Sardis straight to the ground. When Darius heard that this unprovoked attack was backed by a city he'd barely even heard of, a place called Athens, he was absolutely livid. Herodotus tells us he called for his bow, shot an arrow into the sky, and prayed, "Grant me vengeance on the Athenians." And then he ordered one of his servants to say to him 3 times at every single meal, "Master, remember the Athenians." And the consequence of that memory was invasion. A massive Persian army, now led by Darius's son Xerxes, marched into Greece. And at a narrow mountain pass called Thermopylae, the Hot Gates, a tiny, defiant force of Greeks, led by 300 Spartans, decided to make their stand. They stood there, facing the unstoppable tide of the world's largest empire, a moment of impossible odds that has been frozen in time ever since.